Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about symbolism in The Little Mermaid. I did a series of videos a while back about symbolism in popular media, and with the Disney live-action Little Mermaid coming out, I figured this was a good time to visit that. Except I'm not going to be talking about the live-action Little Mermaid, and I'm actually not going to be talking about the Disney animated movie either. I'm going to be talking about the fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, which, if you're not familiar with it, you might be surprised to know is very, very different from the Disney movie. So, if you haven't read that yet, go read it, please, before you watch this video, unless you want to be spoiled for the ending, because the ending is very, very different. But in any case, let's get started. So there are four things that I think are really obvious symbols in Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid. First of all, the fishtail and the legs. The fact that she has to give up her tail in exchange for legs in order to live on land and try to get the prince to fall in love with her, I think very much represents everything else that she is having to leave behind. Her home, her family, the entire world that she's lived in all of her life up until this point. I can't imagine that that would be easy. You know, the Disney movie and the original really both kind of portray it as a relatively easy decision for her to leave the ocean and go live on land. But I have to think that that would probably be something that would require a lot of thought. Unless, of course, you're like 15 or 16 and just totally infatuated with the handsome human. The fact that in the original it's actually a very painful transformation, I think kind of alludes to that, even though the original doesn't really go into any detail about how it would be difficult to leave behind the life that you've known all these years. I think the fact that the transformation itself is physically painful, and the being on land is physically painful as well, with her feet feeling like they're being cut by knives when she walks. So I feel like it definitely gives a little bit more attention to the difficulty of giving up her life in the ocean and going to live on land than the Disney movie does. Of course, in the original, there's a ton of religious symbolism as well, and religious themes that are woven into it, and a big part of what she wants in marrying the prince is to gain a human soul and have the chance to eventually go to heaven. And so giving up her tail and living on land isn't just about following her heart, it's also kind of like a religious conversion. And so I think that also, there's something symbolic going on there with the physically changing her body while she's attempting to change her soul or lack thereof, because mermaids in the original are said to not have souls. When she trades her tail for legs, in both the Disney movie and the original, she also gives away her voice. She trades it to the sea witch in exchange for the legs. And in the original, it's actually much more gruesome than in Disney because she physically gets her tongue cut out. I think that giving up the voice is also very, very symbolic in terms of the path that she takes in the story. In a huge way, she's giving up her freedom, not exactly her freedom, but her agency, her ability to speak for herself and make choices and be heard. She's very much kind of pulled along by the forces of the narrative after this point and doesn't really have a lot of opportunity to make her own choices up until the very, very end. The voice is, it's just a thing that we use to communicate on a regular basis, but it's also, I think, has a lot of symbolic connotations in terms of, like, your voice is how you make a difference in your life. And obviously, for people who aren't able to speak for whatever reason, there are ways of, with sign language or writing or various other ways of communicating. But I think putting it in the story where she doesn't have a voice and she can't speak for herself, can't tell people what's going on, it puts her in a position of having very little power over her own fate, up until that moment at the end that we're going to get to in just a minute. I actually think it would be really cool, and I may be working on something relating to this, to have like a retelling of it where she finds other ways of communicating, other than like her actual voice, but that's a completely different topic. In the original, she really is kind of helpless once she gives it up, and I think there's definitely something very symbolic going on there. One thing that we're told about mermaids in the original that Disney does not touch with a 10-foot pole is that they don't leave behind physical bodies when they die. They turn into sea foam, they dissolve. That's symbolic because we've got the whole thing with mermaids not having souls, and so it almost feels like they're not really real at all. They're just there for however long, and then they cease to exist in a very complete sort of way, not even leaving behind a body. But I think in a broader sense, the sea foam just represents death as well. when it says the mermaid will turn to sea foam, we know after the first time that it's mentioned what that means, that it means she's gonna die. At the very end of the story, after the prince has gotten engaged to a human woman and clearly has no feelings for the Little Mermaid and has no idea that she has feelings for him, the mermaid visits with her sisters who have found out what happened to her and went to the sea witch to make a bargain of their own. Now, the sisters' bargain is not for legs or a chance to live on land, it's for a chance to bring the Little Mermaid back to the ocean. They give her a knife and they tell her that if she kills the prince and his human bride with the knife, then she will get a tail back and she'll be able to go back to the ocean and live her full life as a mermaid. However, the mermaid, or she's not really a mermaid anymore, but the protagonist of the story says, yeah, no, and does not do that, and therefore, when the sun rises the day after his wedding and she's supposed to dissolve into sea foam, what happens instead is that she transforms into a daughter of the air and is given another chance as a new kind of being. So the knife, that's the moment I was referring to earlier where the mermaid finally has a choice. She finally has a say in what she's going to do, what kind of an outcome the story is going to have, rather than just kind of being pulled along by it. And that's the moment where she shows her true moral character and that she's not willing to do something so horrible just in order to extend her own life. So I think that the knife represents temptation and also represents a choice between right and wrong, specifically one where the right choice is a selfless and self-sacrificial one, and the wrong choice would be the selfish thing to do. It's very clear-cut. It's a situation in which, yes, it might be tempting for her to do the wrong thing, but it's very clearly the wrong thing to do, and she chooses to do the right thing even though that involves sacrifice. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Symbolism in The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. I hope that you enjoyed this and found it to be interesting. If you liked this and you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday.